It started as a whisper. Every night at exactly 3:13 a.m., Daniel would wake up to the sound of something tapping against his window. A soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was the wind or the branches outside his cabin. But then, he saw the owl. It perched on the dead tree just outside, its huge, glowing yellow eyes locked onto his. It never moved, never blinked, just stared. The first few nights, he tried to brush it off. Owls were common in the woods, weren't they? But then, something changed. The owl was mimicking him. If he tilted his head, the owl tilted its head the same way. If he raised a hand to his face, the owl twitched a claw in response. If he moved closer to the window, the owl leaned forward, and one night when he whispered, "What do you want?" the owl's beak opened slightly, as if it were about to answer. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. He quickly shut the blinds, heart pounding, but the tapping continued. Tap, tap, tap. The next morning, Daniel walked to his nearest neighbor's cabin, Mr. Holden, an old man who lived about half a mile away. The two rarely spoke, but Daniel wanted to ask if he had noticed the owl too. When he arrived, something felt wrong. The front door was slightly open. Flies buzzed near the entrance. The place smelled rotten. Daniel hesitated, then pushed the door open further. Inside, everything was still, too still. Mr. Holden sat in his chair, motionless. His mouth was slightly open, his head twisted at an unnatural angle. His eyes were missing, torn out, as if by a beak. Daniel staggered back, choking on a gasp. And then he noticed something else, perched on a wooden beam above, staring down at him. Was the owl. Its glowing yellow eyes didn't blink. They didn't need to. Daniel felt its gaze, pressing into him, digging into his thoughts. He stumbled backward, his pulse roaring in his ears. The owl slowly opened its beak and let out a deep, guttural hoo. It almost sounded like laughter. That night, Daniel barricaded his windows and doors. He tried to convince himself that what he had seen in Holden's cabin was just coincidence. Maybe an animal had gotten to the old man. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. But at 3:13 a.m., the tapping started again. Tap, tap, tap. Daniel clenched his fists, refusing to look. His breathing was shallow. His phone buzzed beside him. A text message. It was from Mr. Holden's number. "Why did you leave me?" Daniel's stomach twisted. His hands shook as he slowly turned his head toward the window. The owl was there, but it wasn't just staring anymore, it was grinning. Daniel's breath hitched. Owls didn't grin, owls didn't smile. And yet in the darkness, that wide beak curled at the edges like something pretending to be an owl, something wearing its form like a mask. Then it spoke. Not a hoot, not a screech, a whisper. "Let me in, Daniel." Daniel shot out of bed, knocking over a lamp. His pulse thundered in his ears. He grabbed his phone, fumbling to call someone, anyone. But his screen was glitching. The numbers flickered and shifted. His reflection on the screen wasn't moving like he was. His own reflection was smiling back at him. Outside, the owl spread its wings, growing taller, its body twisting into something humanoid, something wrong. Its beak split apart, and its eyes burned with something ancient. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from his own number. "You shouldn't have looked." Daniel ran. He didn't care where. He just needed to get away. He grabbed his keys, burst out the door, and sprinted toward his truck. The forest loomed around him, trees stretching high like skeletal fingers. But as he reached his truck, he saw something that made his blood turn to ice. His truck was already running. The driver's side door was open, and he was sitting in the driver's seat. Daniel, another Daniel, turned to look at him, a slow smile stretching across his face. The owl sat on the dashboard, its glowing eyes locked onto him. "Going somewhere?" the other him asked. The final moments, Daniel screamed. He didn't remember what happened next. He didn't remember running. He didn't remember falling. All he knew was the darkness, and then sunlight. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was standing in the woods, barefoot, his clothes torn. His cabin was gone, no sign of it, no sign of his truck, no sign of Mr. Holden's house, just the woods, and the owl, perched on a branch, watching him, waiting. Daniel Murdoch was never seen again. But in the weeks after his disappearance, hikers in the area reported strange sightings. A figure watching them from the trees, a deep, echoing hoot that sounded too much like laughter, and an owl with glowing yellow eyes following them home. If you made it to the end of this story, you're one of the brave ones. But tell me, was it just a story? Or could there be some truth hidden inside? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed this nightmare, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because there are more stories waiting for you. And remember, some nightmares don't end when you wake up. I'll see you in the next one.